Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel and another Overwatch weekly video. We are on week 4 for the Overwatch League Season 2 Stage 1. Let's take a look first, of course, as we usually do, at the week 3 picks that I made and how I did. If you'll notice at the top, I wrote 11-4, 26-21. That is wrong, of course. That's only 15 games. The actual record is 12-4. 27-21. You can count it if you want to check. If you don't believe me, but that is what the record is. But let's take a look first at Thursday, where we had a pretty good day on my end, 3-1 day. The first game was a Philadelphia Fusion taking on the Washington Justice. Philadelphia Fusion walking away with a win once again, getting back into their form. Boombox playing. They looked significantly better against the Justice than they did last week, where they took their 2 losses. So I thought they did pretty well, and I think that the Fusion are going to be back into a top contender as we get further into the season. But I still have a couple questions about them, such as Sato's Winston versus Reinhardt play. Sato's a very good Winston, and I think he plays really well. Not a great Reinhardt. I wonder why. I really question why they keep him in on that Reinhardt if they could play Fraggy, who is known to be a really good Reinhardt, but they roll with Sato anyway. Look, I'm not a coach. I don't claim to be a coach or know nearly as much as a coach, but if you need to run Reinhardt and you have a tank player who knows Reinhardt very well, I don't really understand why you keep him on the bench when you could very much play him in a Reinhardt-heavy meta and let him play the hero that he's really good at. But we'll have to see what the Philadelphia Fusion going forward, but that's my take. Next, the Boston Uprising beat the Seoul Dynasty, which I did not expect, as much as I actually have started to like the Boston Uprising recently. I didn't think they'd win that game, but they did, and they did it in a decently convincing fashion, so shout out to you, Boston Uprising. Next, we had the Guangzhou Charge beating the Florida Mayhem. Florida Mayhem have looked better since week 1. I think they've looked more improved. McGravy looked very good in this match, their new signing. So I think that they have been one of the better teams, and in terms of improving throughout the weeks, but they still struggle. And I would like to see how they can do. I think signing McGravy was a good idea. Clearly they care about improving, so I think Florida Mayhem will start getting better. I think they have gotten better, so this is just kind of, to me, the first step. But it's going to be a rough early season, but I think by the late season they may be a little bit more respectable of a team. We may see some stage playoffs, maybe, but it will be tough for them to get to that point. Finally, on Thursday, we had the San Francisco Shock taking on the Hangzhou Spark. The San Francisco Shock coming out on top of that game in my big pick game for Thursday. I didn't get to watch most of that game. I watched the first map, which is Spark 1. So I went to bed thinking I was probably going to be wrong, but the Shock came out after that pretty dominantly. Sinatra has been very good on that Zarya this season, so got to give it to him and the rest of the San Francisco Shock for playing very well so far this season and this stage in particular. Up next, we move into Friday, where first game, London Spitfire taking on the LA Gladiators. That was my big pick game for that day. And the London Spitfire came away with the win, had them win in that game. It was a good win for the Spitfire. Spitfire starting to look more like the team that won the championship in Season 1. I think guard playing has been a huge help for this team. I don't think Birdring's bad. I just think guard's a little bit better for what this team needs to do. It allows Prophet to play Zarya, which is a lot better than having him play Brig and Birdring play that Zarya. I think the team just works a little bit better with this team, and it allows for that Sombra play, which is very, very big. So I like what they've been doing so far, and I'm excited to see how they do with this new kind of format going forward. Next, the New York Excelsior took on the Toronto Defiant. NYXL walking away with that one. Pretty convincing win. NYXL looking very good this week. Coming up with some big wins. I'll talk more about them when we get to the top 10 standings currently for the stage, but they have been consistently improving week in and week out, and they've been looking more dominant week in and week out. They didn't get a 4-0 this week like they did against the Outlaws last week, but still very good in the way they've been playing. Vancouver Titans beat the LA Valiant. Not much to say. Valiant walked away with a map win on that one. Titans have looked really good. They look to me to be potentially the team to beat right now. I think it's a very close race between the NYXL and the Vancouver Titans, but Vancouver Titans looking to be as good as what people predicted. I underrated them a little bit, and they're proving me wrong. Finally, ending off Friday, we had the Shanghai Dragons beating the Chengdu Hunters. Finally, the Shanghai Dragons, 2 wins under their belt. They've looked much better. They've looked like a pretty good team with the way this team is built now. And I'm excited to see them continue to improve and build upon what they've done. So let's move on to Saturday, where the Atlanta Reign took on the Paris Eternal. Paris Eternal had been looking like one of the best teams in the league, though they didn't really play many tough opponents. Gladiators have looked pretty bad. The London Spitfire looked bad week 1. Didn't really know what they were doing at that point in time. Still kind of figuring it out. Atlanta Reign looked to be a good team, but also they hadn't really beaten anybody. And they had a big statement win against the Paris Eternal. Did not see it coming. Obviously, everyone has seen that DeFran play on Hollywood by now, on that Zarya. It was a really good game for the Reign, though. I thought the Reign looked like a better team the entire game, and the score reflects that. And I think that it's a really big wake-up call for the Eternal, because I think some of the issues that I had with the Eternal and some of the problems that I think people thought they might deal with are happening. I thought they had some questionable ults, and also Soon's getting his ults eaten quite a bit. It's a team that I'm questioning a little bit more. Obviously, they've only played 3 games, but they've got a tough end to their schedule. Their schedule going forward is a little bit difficult, so you gotta hope that they know what they're doing and they can improve, but they look to have a tough couple games coming up. Next, Houston Outlaws took on the Florida Mayhem. Houston Outlaws won that one. Didn't get to watch much of that game, but what I did see, Houston Outlaws looked a lot better than the Florida Mayhem. And good for the Houston Outlaws, finally getting some of those wins that they so desperately need. I think that this is kind of where, if you're the Houston Outlaws, you start to gain some steam, and you get to work on figuring out how you're going to go going forward. But I think they've figured a little bit more out about that lineup, and I think they're going to be doing significantly better from this point forward than they did the first 2 weeks. San Francisco Shock, of course, beating the Washington Justice. The Justice just look horrible. They look really bad. The Shock look very good, but the Justice are they're abysmal. They're not fun to watch. They're just frustrating to watch. They don't look good ever, really, and you gotta wonder what's going on with that team and if they even have the capacity to beat some of these really good teams. Because right now, I don't think they have the ability to compete with anybody. I don't know if they're worse than the Season 1 Shanghai Dragons, but they are atrocious. Finally, the Dallas Fuel beat the Shanghai Dragons. Another very good game, very close game, 3-2 game. It was a loss, of course, for the Shanghai Dragons, but it was a good loss. It was the kind of loss that you learn a lot from. They do play the Dallas Fuel again in Week 4, which I'll get to when we get to that, but the Shanghai Dragons, I think, have a lot to look forward to. I think they've looked a lot better. I think they have become people expect them to be a lot better, and they look a lot better. I think the Shanghai Dragons will be a team. I think they have definitely what it takes to be a playoff team at the end of the season. They could be a stage playoff team at the end of the stage, but they need to start getting some more wins, and they need to start beating some really good teams. That's really what they need right now. They need that big statement win. They haven't gotten that yet, but I think they're getting to that point, and they will be a very good team. I think when this season is over, people are going to be very impressed with the Shanghai Dragons. Finally, we have Sunday. The Toronto Defiant walked away with the win against the Boston Uprising. Neko beating his former team. Boston Uprising 0-2 against players formerly on their team. Toronto Defiant looked very good that game. Looked good throughout, and kudos to them. Honestly, I think they've been a very good team so far. The Hangzhou Spark took on the LA Gladiators. Hangzhou Spark walked away with the win. It was a close game. It was a good game. But the Spark, Gushui finally starting to get into the rhythm of that team. He's learning his Korean. He's learning how to play with a Korean roster. I thought he looked very, very good against the Gladiators. I think the team looked better with him in. I think they're starting to get to that point now where he's being worked in more, and it's going to be really dangerous going forward watching that team. Next, LA Valiant losing to the Guangzhou Charge. This to me is the game that just the Valiant are done. This is kind of my game where Valiant, you need to win this game if you want to have any chance of doing anything in Stage 1. They're the first team eliminated from the stage playoffs, and it's just embarrassing. I mean, they look bad. They don't look like a team that knows what they're doing. They don't seem to have a clear identity. It's not fun to watch. They played pretty well in the first week. Like the first couple games, they walked away with 2 losses to New York and Hangzhou, but they were close. Then they got beat up on by the Titans. They got beat up on by the Toronto Defiant. They got pretty beat up on by the Charge. They're not playing super close games now, and it's been looking like a struggle for the Valiant. And I don't really know what's going on with them. But you'd hope that they would start to look better, but at the moment, they really don't look it. Final game of the week was the New York Excelsior taking on the Seoul Dynasty. It was a very good game. There's a 3-1 score in favor of the New York Excelsior. It was much closer than that. New Bonnie was an incredible map. That was some really good defense by both teams. NYXL became the first team locked up for the stage playoffs, which influenced my pick a lot for Week 4. It made it a tough decision, but they are sitting pretty now. They're guaranteed to be in the stage playoffs. If they can get a win next week, they guarantee their division. They don't play in Week 5. So New York's in a pretty good spot if they can finish out strong. I think the only team that can potentially take the division from them, the Atlanta Reign could take it, and the Paris Eternal could take it. They're the only 2 teams that could take the number 1 spot for New York Excelsior. But if New York wins in Week 4, they are guaranteed that number 1 spot in the division. Not necessarily guaranteed the number 1 spot in playoffs. It depends what happens with the Vancouver Titans and how they do, but New York is looking pretty good, and not much to say about it. So that's all for my Week 3 stuff. Let's take a look at my Week 4 picks. And you can see the week looks a little weird. 3 games on Thursday and Friday, 4 games on Saturday and Sunday. Don't really know why they went with that, but they did. So we'll start with Thursday, where the first game is the Atlanta Reign taking on the LA Gladiators. My big pick game for Thursday. I'm taking the Atlanta Reign. This win against the Paris Eternal made me a pretty big believer in the Reign and what they can do. They've looked very strong. They look like a team to really potentially go for it all, and I think they are going to be one of the better teams coming out of that expansion group this season. So kudos to them. I thought they played very, very well, especially against Paris Eternal. Next, the Philadelphia Fusion taking on the LA Valiant. Of course, I'm taking the Fusion. They've looked good. Valiant have not. It's a pretty simple equation. Toronto Defiant taking on the Chengdu Hunters. Once again, Chengdu Hunters not looking that great. Toronto Defiant looking pretty good. So I'm taking the Defiant in that one. Coming into Friday, some really good-looking games. The first one, the Vancouver Titans taking on the Paris Eternal. If the Eternal had walked away from that Reign game with a win, or even just not a 4-0 loss, this would have been my big pick game, because I think both these teams look very good in GOATs, but Paris Eternal just got completely manhandled. If they can beat the Vancouver Titans, man, that's a huge win for them. That's the biggest win you can really pull off. It would be a master win for them. It would really kind of help them propel themselves to potentially being a title contender for at least the stage. But the Vancouver Titans have looked so good. I really can't see them losing a game to the Paris Journal. So I got to roll with the team that's been playing better. That's the Vancouver Titans. My big pick game for Friday is the New York Excelsior taking on the San Francisco Shock. Oh, I already think this game's going to be the best game of the week. Oh, I think it's going to be a really good game. I try to avoid picking a team to be in more than one big pick game per week, but I pretty much couldn't avoid it this week. So, this game's going to be so good, I think. I'm picking New York because I think they want to lock up that number one seed if possible. It's not guaranteed, of course. The Vancouver Titans could also take it, but New York, to me, has looked like a team that has not wanted to take the foot off the pedal. The Shock, to me, they've lost some games to some teams that, how good they are, a little bit in question. And to me, I look at New York. They've been very good. They've beaten teams. They haven't lost yet. It's hard to pick against them. So I'm not going to pick against them. I'm going to take NYXL. Final game on Friday is the Dallas Fuel taking on the Shanghai Dragons. I hate the fact that they're playing this week when they played last week. Literally back-to-back games. Look, Dallas Fuel won the first time. I think they'll win the second time. I thought they made some mistakes. I think Arrow and Jane and the other Dallas Fuel coaches are going to look at that last game. They're going to really go in and learn from it, and I think they're going to be just fine against the Shanghai Dragons this time. I hope it's another really good game, but I'm going to keep with the Fuel, as I think they were the better team, of course, when they played this past week. So that's really my reasoning for that one. Move on to Saturday. We have the Houston Outlaws taking on the LA Valiant. Taking the Houston Outlaws, I can definitely see the LA Valiant winning this game. It's probably the only game left on their schedule that they could potentially win, but I'm not picking against the Houston Outlaws right now. They look to be at least somewhat good. The Valiant are very, very, very heavily struggling, so gotta roll with the Valiant losing that one. Next, we have the Seoul Dynasty taking on the Washington Justice. That's an easy win for me for the Dynasty. Like I said, I think the Washington Justice have looked pretty bad. I don't think they've looked very strong. They look like the worst team in the league by far, in my opinion. Can't pick them to win against a team that I still think has looked good, has lost some pretty tough matches, has lost some teams I think are good. So that's my thoughts on that one. Next, we have the Guangzhou Charge taking on the LA Gladiators. Gotta roll with the Charge. They've looked very solid. The Gladiators have a bit of a communication issue, I wonder, or at least I think they do. And I think if Bishu doesn't come back soon, the Gladiators might struggle more. I think they have the talent. I think they're just they are having some miscommunication. You can see it when you watch them play. They look like a team that is a little bit confused. So I got to roll with the Charge for this one. Plus, I think the Charge have played very well. I think Hotba is one of the best players right now. I think he's playing very well. So I'm rolling with the Charge here over the Gladiators. And my big pick for Saturday is the Defiant taking on the Spark. I'm taking the Toronto Defiant. I think the Toronto Defiant have looked incredible so far. They are a team that I think has looked better week in and week out. They've improved a lot. They're at full strength now. They weren't at full strength at the start of the season. They went 2-1 when they weren't at full strength, when they didn't have arguably their best player. Now they're at full strength. They look very good. They beat a hot Boston team. I don't really know what to say about this team other than they look very good, and I expect them to have a very good season at this point, because I think they look like potentially the second best expansion team. I know obviously the Reign and the Charge are very high up there too, but Toronto's got a lot of stuff going on, man. They got some really good players, and I can't pick against them. they're that good. And that's really what I gotta say about them. I think they're a very good team. They're a solid team. And I'm picking them to beat the Spark. Finally, we can move into Sunday, where we have opening up the day. We have my big pick game, Paris Eternal taking on the San Francisco Shock. This is a huge game for both of these teams to keep their stage playoff hopes alive. I really like both of these teams, but I think the Eternal, their loss to the Reign, it was bad. They looked like a team that clearly has problems. Wasn't the kind of loss of like, okay, they just got outplayed. It was they got outplayed and they looked bad. So I think the Shock have looked good consistently. Even in their losses, I think they've looked pretty good. So I'm going to have to roll with the Shock for this one. But I could definitely see that one going either way. Next game for Sunday is the London Spitfire against the Shanghai Dragons. Another one I think could go either way, but I think the Shanghai Dragons have looked just slightly worse than the Spitfire. That's the only game for the Spitfire that week, so they can put all of their attention on that game. I think that's something that you can't underestimate, or you can't count out. I think the Spitfire walk away with a win. That one, I think it'll be a close one, but I think ultimately the Spitfire, looking slightly better, will walk away with that one. Florida Mayhem against Boston Uprising. Boston Uprising easy for me. Florida Mayhem still looking a little weak. Boston Uprising, though they lost to the Toronto Defiant in somewhat bad fashion, I still think they look good. I still think they're a solid team, and I'm gonna take the boys, up in Boston to win that one. Final game of the week is the Vancouver Titans against the Chengdu Hunters. That's a really easy one for me. Vancouver Titans look like they are one of the best teams in the league. Chengdu Hunters, not so much. So I'm taking the Titans in that one. I don't think the Chengdu Hunters have really impressed me. I think their first win came down to no one really knew what to expect from them. Their second win came down to playing Florida. But I'm not too sold on the Chengdu Hunters. I think they need to get some good tank play in with Jakirin or Jichirin or Jishirin, however you pronounce it. I think they need to. He needs to come in, and we need to see him and see how they perform. And even Yang Xiaolong coming in will probably help too. But just haven't been impressed with this team, so that's why I have them losing to the Titans, and because the Titans are just that good. So those are all my picks for Week 4. Take a look at the divisional standings right now. New York and Vancouver still firmly up top, but the Reign now in that number 2 spot for the Atlantic. The Pacific, I don't remember who was number 2. It might have been the Shock, but I don't think it was. But that's just me being forgetful. But very impressed so far with a lot of these teams, and I think they have looked very, very good. I think they've looked very solid so far. There's a really fun competition going on in the middle there, with all these 2-win teams and 3-win teams, or bunch of really close teams. The Seoul Dynasty actually were number 2. Going into this week, so they dropped a lot of change in a lot of these standings. There's a really cool competition going there. You got how many? You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 2-win teams. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 3-win teams. Like over half the league is sitting in that 2 to 3 win column, and then you got teams like New York and the Titans who are running away with it. So it'll be fun to watch to see how it breaks down at the end of this stage, going into next stage, and how the season as the season goes on, how the breakup starts to really show. But so far, it's been very entertaining and very fun to watch, and I'm excited to see where it goes. But finally, of course, top 10 stage standings. You can see New York there in the bold. That means they are locked in for stage playoffs. They've already gotten their spot. They're not confirmed to be the number 1 seed yet, but they are locked in to be there. They haven't locked in the division yet. The only team eliminated, as I mentioned before, from the stage standings or stage playoff possibility is the LA Valiant. So, pretty good look so far. The Atlanta Reign in that number 3 spot. The Paris Eternal were in that number 3 spot, and they drop out of the stage playoffs. So it'll be very fun to watch and see how these stage playoffs go and how they end up. I'm really excited to see it. I'm super excited for stage playoffs. We still got 2 weeks, of course, but I'm excited for those. I think they'll be really fun. So that's everything I have for you all. If you enjoy, consider liking and subscribing. It means a lot. And if you want to see more content like this, of course, that's the best way to do so. But I'm going to get out of here. I'd love to hear from you, your thoughts on any of the games in the comments down below. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.